Hello, and welcome to another video. Today, we're going to be trying to figure out what champions you should play, what roles you should play, and what kinds of combinations of champions, how many of them you would want to play, and also a bit about runes and items. So we can begin, I guess. So for top lane, more of a 1v1. We want to bully, we want to be better laning, whatever. We want to hoard freeze, we want to hoard slow push, whatever else. That's basically what we're focusing on. And the recommended champions are going to be obviously the easy ones, which all of you already know because you heard about them 20,000 times, like Garen, maybe Darius or something. But that doesn't really matter as much. The more important thing is how are we going to decide on a champ pool? Because we don't only want to play one champion OTP it. I mean, it's fine to OTP a champ, obviously, but at some point, OTPing a champ is just going to be a bit detrimental anyway. So if you're getting above like gold, plat, like if you're getting to say like plat or diamond level or whatever, then now you suddenly want to expand your champion pool. So the important thing is for us that it's not that common for us to need to go AP in top lane. So it's not going to be that important for us to pick up an AP champion. But what is going to be important is to pick, let's say, two champions that each can fulfill a different role. Say like a team fight champ and a split push champ, or a champ that does well into range, and a champ that does pretty badly into range. An example of that is, say, Malphite. Like, Malphite is good at team fighting. Malphite is pretty good into range champs because he does not give a fuck about range. Like, Malphite will just ult you and you will just be annoyed. But if you're melee, you don't care as much about Malphite because it's not really that much of an issue for you. You're usually tankier, you usually have more utility, and so on and so forth. Another example is something like Shen. He's like really a team player, or like Set can be pretty good in fights. And then we have these champs like Garen. Like Garen is complete NPC in fights. Like Garen is just scale early, move on, and then we can split push. Maybe we can fight if we're fed, but if we're not a fed Garen, like it's going to be pretty useless. So in top lane, we're going to be looking for these two main things to decide our champ pool. In jungle, it's going to be very important to pick one AP and one AD champion, because if you don't play an AP and an AD champion, you're going to be very annoyed in jungle, especially if you only play AP. So in jungle, pretty much always, you're going to want to at least play an AD champion, and preferably have one AP champion you can play. The good thing about jungle is that there are pretty simple champions you can play, both for AD and AP. So here in jungle, if you're a lower elo, I would recommend that you play something that's a simple full clear champion. Say like Hecarim or something. Hecarim sounds pretty decent. That can be like your full clear style. And then if you're playing like full clear, then you can also play like Evelyn or something, and that's fine. If you're deciding to play a ganking jungle playstyle, which is also fine, then here you should commit to something like a... I mean, Volibear is fine sometimes, but I'm not sure about the state he's in at the moment. Though I don't really recommend ganking junglers the most, but like stuff like Jarvan is usually decent. Let me think about it. I think Vi is like really good at the moment also, and I think Vi is pretty simple. So you could do something like that. I think that these champions are going to be fine enough. Obviously, there are the best champions you can improve on, but I think that's important to find a champion that's at least acceptable to improve on, but you find enjoyable. So I would say that stuff like... I'll just outline the champions I think are fine to improve on. So I think that in top lane, you would mostly want to commit to something like Cho'Gath, Darius, Mundo, Garen, maybe Jax, but that's a bit iffy already. Malphite could be fine. Mordekaiser is good. Olaf is fine, I guess, but a bit iffy already. Maybe like Shen or something is like fine also. Maybe Tryndamere could be fine also. So maybe Volibear, but just check if Volibear is like decent or not at the time. And I don't know, it's fine. So if you like any of these champions and you find them really enjoyable, then you can just stick to these. In jungle, I would recommend going something like Diana, Evelyn. Graves is like a 50-50, so I wouldn't really recommend it. Hecarim is fine. Jarvan is fine. Mordekaiser should be fine in jungle also. Nocturne is usually fine. But like just notice that the champions I say are fine, but they're not the best, right? I think Trundle is pretty good. I think when Volibear is decent, he's pretty good. I think Wukong is like fine. I think Vi is like pretty good. I think Xin Zhao is pretty good for improving generally. Next we go to mid lane. In mid lane, you're going to also want an AD and an AP champ. And in jungle, you want to play the same style. Like if you're playing full clear, you play 2 full clear champs in jungle. If you play ganking, you play 2 ganking champs. There is no variance there. In mid lane, we're going to be looking at an AP and an AD champion, because it's pretty important to be AP or AD in mid, because sometimes your top lane wants to go AP, sometimes your jungle goes AP, and if you end up being like triple AP, it's like pretty bad. It's like really bad. So ideally we would want 1 assassin and 1 mage, or like some kind of consistent type champion. So we diversify a little bit here. So I think that here, something like, I think Tryndamere is a really good pick, because I think Tryndamere is really simple. And I think that he's pretty much the easiest and the best AD mid you can pick. I don't think that he's just objectively the best AD mid, but I think that for the skill level that you need to be able to somewhat play it, I think it's worth the time investment. And then for an AP champion, you just have the classics. You have like the Annie, you have the Orianna, those are good. Then you have some champs that are like fine, but not the best. Like this dumb stuff like Vladimir and Twisted Fate and Ari and Lissandra's. Lissandra's like pretty decent. Lissandra's pretty good. And Victor's like decent, fine. But I wouldn't really recommend the other champs. I would mostly recommend that you stick to something like Lissandra Tryndamere or Annie Tryndamere or whatever else, and this should be like a pretty solid mid lane champion pool. I think Vladimir can be fine mostly because Tryndamere and Vladimir are kind of similar in a way, but I wouldn't really recommend Vladimir otherwise. But if you really enjoy one of these champs, it's fine. But I would not recommend picking the champs that I did not list, because those champs are going to hold you back quite a bit. Okay, in ADC, we're going to be looking for something a bit more one tricky, because in ADC we don't really need 2 champions most of the time. In ADC, stuff like Ashe is really good. Ashe is just good in general, because Ashe is good in every single elo. She's good for improving, she's good for low elo, she's good for smurfing, she's good for playing in high elo. She's just good for everything. Then if you don't like Ashe, Miss Fortune is usually fine, but I think Miss Fortune at the moment is pretty meh. So I think you could go for something like Varus, but then you have to learn his build paths like Lethality and on hit and stuff. But maybe I think you can just play Lethality Varus most games, and that's like fine enough. Though if you just play on hit into tanks and Lethality most games, whenever they don't have a lot of tanks, it should be fine enough. Though I would recommend Ashe highly here, because all the other champs are, well, they can be pretty weird. Like this champ is just meh. This champ is meh. Like this champ is just difficult, 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 difficult. Like this champ is also difficult but really good. This champ is just bad. Like it's just kind of meh. I think Twitch is like pretty easy to play, but I think he builds very, very bad habits in the game. So if you play ADC, I would recommend you stick to Ashe and Varus. That's going to be the best. And moving on to support role. In support role, it's going to be pretty hard to improve for most people. But support has basically 3 distinct playstyles. The first playstyle in support role is the engage playstyle, obviously, where you have Alistar, Mumu, and so on. It's funny that both of these champions are the first ones because they're probably the ones that I would recommend. Like maybe like a Mumu is the champion that I would say that is pretty good if you're looking to play engage support. I think he lets you do a lot of stuff early game, and yet you can kind of see when you fuck up. So I think that champion's kind of decent, though I don't recommend support role or support champions in general for improving. But yeah, then you have the pure enchanter playstyle, which is commonly misunderstood as playing Janna and standing behind your carry and just pressing E, or playing Soraka and just standing behind your carry and pressing W. But the reality behind this playstyle is that you're going to bully when you're strong against a lot of melee champions. It's going to end up being level 1, level 2, maybe level 3 or whatever. And then you're going to chill, basically. And then when you can bully again, you're going to bully again. So here it's pretty important to know when you're strong and when you're weak. The biggest abuser of this playstyle is something like Nami, because Nami is really strong a lot of the time. And so if you know when you're weak as Nami, it's pretty hard to die, but you're gonna have a lot of damage, a lot of impact. Though the champs I would recommend here are honestly probably Nami and Janna, but I think Janna more so at the moment, though I'll probably make a Nami guide later, because if you understand the way Nami works, then I think she's very good, but I think most people don't get how she works, so they play her in a very awkward way, and then it's not so good. I think Janna's just really good though, and really hard to die on, so that can be a pretty good pick. The last type of support is going to be the poke support, so where you play your Brand, your Karma. Karma's like between Enchanter and poke, but whatever. Zerath, and so on. So these champions are pretty good at carrying, usually, but they're also pretty skill shot dependent. So if you hit all of your spells, even if you play badly, you're often gonna end up winning. And if you miss all of your spells, even if you play fine, you can end up losing, which is a bit annoying. So I wouldn't really recommend these champions. The most recommended out of these would probably be Karma, but I think it's just not that good. The thing is, with support role, these champions are very, very unbalanced. Like some of these champions win like 54% of games, like Janna and Nami, while other champions win like 49, like Karma. While there are some good broken champions, like a Mumu or something, which can overcome the fact that some other champs are really overpowered. So yeah, I think this is about it for the champions. So in general, no matter what role you play, this should give you a general outlook of how you should shape your champion pool until you're at least like High Master, because there's no reason to expand more than this before it. And after that, expanding is good. Though obviously if you're like Master, then you can pick up some harder champions, but the concepts stay the same. In top lane, that concept. In mid lane, like the AP/AD. In jungle, you stick to one playstyle, and so on, but have AP/AD. So those are the most important things to keep in mind in each role. Then we can quickly go over runes. So runes are largely cope. So if you can just look up on a site which champion plays which runes the most, it's usually going to be fine, and that can make you climb no matter what anyway, most of the time. But the key thing to take away with runes is that it's important that you play around them. So if you take Halo Blades, you play for the poke 3 autos. If you play Dark Harvest, you play for the resets with Harvest. If you play Predator, you get boots early, you run at someone, and you get kills that way. If you play Electrocute, you have scaling, big damage and all in. And the same thing applies to like these runes and these runes, but I'll like just quickly go over this. I mean, I won't go over the like really obvious ones, like these ones, because it's just damage, heal, damage. Like you just take this and solo queue pretty much anyway, unless you're like Graves or something and you go Umbral. Treasure Hunter, Snowballing, Ingenious if you have like good active items, Relentless for mostly roaming and moving through the map, and Ult Hunter is like pretty meh, but it's like good on some champs that are really reliant on ult, like Cortis or Shen or something. Here, it's really important to understand the way your runes work, because with Conqueror, you need to use your spells so that you can stack them, and you need to hit your spells. And if you stack this, you're going to be pretty fucking strong. But if you don't, it's completely fucking worthless. This rune is really situational. If it was stronger, then you would use it to sustain, but like it is right now, you barely really use it. And this rune is just really strong. It's like the better conquer for ADCs and for a lot of melee champs also, so if you can use this, it's just the best. All-ins are going to be favored. If you stack this, a general rule is that you always win the all-in, but that's only generally. Press the attack is good for short trades, where you all-in or whatever and one-shot enemy. So as long as you play around these playstyles, you're going to be good. These runes are pretty self-explanatory. You just do, like these ones, you just do whatever you need. While these ones, it's kind of like cut down is a bit of a bait rune, because many people will go cut down on like every ADC or whatever, but you end up not even proccing it. Last Stand is really good though, even on like ADC, but it depends if you're a shorter or longer range ADC, because Coop can outperform Last Stand, but it's not too important either way, because the damage difference between these runes is going to be pretty minor, except this rune, because this rune isn't going to proc on their squishies, and therefore you will oftentimes get zero value out of it. These runes are kind of self-explanatory. This one is if you're perma poking, this one if you're sometimes poking, this one if you want to be slippery. This rune is really important for some mages, because that way you can play next to enemy tower and you can still get away from ganks. That's the main use of that. And these are pretty self-explanatory. Support rune. Support rune where you protect yourself and your ally. Support rune where you tank everything. And top lane rune for tank. Self-explanatory again. These runes are kind of interesting. This rune is a snowballing mid-game rune. So in mid-game, if you're already kind of strong, you're going to get a lot more gold and you can get much stronger, and you can just keep snowballing. So that's the purpose of this rune. This rune is going to get changed soon, so I won't really talk about it. I'm pretty sure I saw it get changed soon. And this rune is only used in support. So like Janna and stuff, because it's just obnoxious. But the important thing with runes to note is that even if your champion's recommended rune is, say, Tempo, you can still go PTA or Conquer oftentimes. It doesn't really mean that you can't go any of the other runes. It just means that if you go the other runes, either it's going to be worse, or there needs to be a specific way for you to play around it. Like I talked in my Evelyn guide where you can go Electrocute, and then you can go Sorcery, and this just means that you will probably want to go Sorks early, like Sorks Boots. Meanwhile, something like this would mean that you're rushing for Mythic. So that's like the most interesting stuff about runes. And then if we quickly go over items, items are largely the same thing. The general idea is just that you need a purpose with your items. So that's why I'm going to just go over Mythics as an example. So Shield, Bow, Kraken, Gale Force, for example. Okay. So will I get one shot by unavoidable damage? Probably need Shield Bow. Can I melt the enemy with Kraken and still survive? Probably pretty good. Can I avoid? Say I can avoid like an 800 damage nuke by using Gale Force or a 2-second CC. I mean, do you think Gale Force or Immortal Shield Bow is going to be better? Right? Like, Shield Bow isn't really going to block 800 damage or a 2-second CC. That's just not going to happen. So it's just a purpose thing. Though obviously if your champion can't build something, then obviously you can't. here it's like the same thing. But here it's like a different purpose, right? It's the same thing where you have a purpose for each item, but you're gonna need to figure out what the purpose of the item is. That's your job. So for Duskblade, Eclipse, and Prowlers, it would be something like Duskblade is something that enhances your champion. You play for this item, your champion's already strong, so you support this item, and this item will make the plays for you, basically. Like, you do enough damage to get a reset, you go invis, and you can keep making the play happen. That's the purpose of this item. For Eclipse, the purpose of the item is bursting and also to get pen. This is going to be a really good damage item, right? Probably pretty good on skirmishing also. So this one is like the middle ground. While this one is going to be pure damage. This item is just going to be complete damage one shot and following dashes. That's the main purpose of this item. But this item will enhance your champion in, like, it's hard to say this because it's kind of complicated to explain, or well, it's just confusing, not even complicated. It's just that one item you play for the item, that's Duskblade, and one item plays for you. So Prowlers like does stuff for you. Your champion doesn't actually need to be strong. Your champion needs to be the thing that makes like a play. That's like with these two items. These two items give you the stats that your champion can use to do stuff with. So then it's up to your champion's kit to do the rest. While here, the item gives you the ability to do the rest, but you need to give it the damage, the ability to actually do its thing. So it's just like which one enables which. Like these items enable a champion, and this item needs to be enabled by a champion. We have like these AP mythics, but they're like pretty boring to even talk about. I think the last interesting thing is to talk about Harvester and Hextech Rocket Belt. Hextech Rocket Belt is just going to be pure damage, while Harvester is going to be snowballing and more like carrying skirmishes early on, because Rocket Belt will never outperform in a skirmish at say like 15 minutes compared to Harvester is just not even comparable. I think that's all we really have to go over today. I think this video is mostly geared towards having a healthy mindset for items, runes, and champions, because a lot of this is just being over fixated on by people, where they think I need to play this champion, I need to play that role, I need to play this and that, I need to play these runes, I need to play those items, but it's just not really true. You can climb on anything. I've climbed on every role and a bunch of champions, and it just doesn't really matter. I even play my own builds. Like, I recently played Bloodthirster Rushed Raven. It's not good. I mean, obviously it's better to just go other items. You can go Eclipse. That's the classic build. You can even go Shield Bow. What's the purpose of going BT? Well, there is a purpose, but it's not a very good one, right? Because BT gives you pretty little AD, but what it does give you is a lot of shielding. So if you're already ahead, or well, not shielding, healing. So if you're already ahead and you can bully the enemy, you can bully them even more. You can stay in lane forever. If enemies gank, you're always going to be full HP. You can take bad trades and they're going to work out anyway because you heal 100 HP per auto attack. And you're also going to reach your 3 crit item power spike faster than if you had, say, Eclipse. So if you play around those key factors, right? So you try to get your 3 power spike item, aka IE, your 3 crit item power spike item. And you abuse the fact that you're always full HP and can out-heal every trade, then the item can actually be much better than if you play it the same way as if you play with something like Eclipse, where you have much less healing, but much more damage. At least in the early parts of the game. So that concludes this video. If you learned anything or enjoyed the video, then don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you didn't like the video, you can let me know why. See you next time.